Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm Michelle, and I'm so glad you're here. If you haven't joined our Connected Parent Mastermind, our group coaching program, you're going to want to, because we have a special running. It is $97 for the first month. And it is our premier program where we meet 3 days a week and you get all my modules of instruction. It is a deep dive into connected parenting. So if you're interested, follow the link in our show notes and use the code parenting50 to get 50% off that first month. All right. I want to talk about this idea that I often hear from the naysayers and the other side of the road, the people who use consequences and punishments and threats and bribes and all those things. They tell me, you're doing your daughter a disservice or your daughter's a disservice because you're not showing them what the real world looks and feels like. So they're not going to be able to cope in the real world. And your daughters are not going to understand the real world. And I think they might be right. My daughters don't understand the real world, but they don't understand the parts of the real world in just the right ways. They don't understand why people use threats and bribes and punishments and consequences. They don't understand why people use power and control to get what they want as opposed to leaning into connection. They don't understand a lot of what the real world is talking about. They don't understand why people are manipulative. They don't understand why some adults want to embarrass and shame kids. They don't understand why everyone doesn't value connection. They don't understand why everyone doesn't value mistakes. They don't understand why people want to lean into blame and want to lean into shame. And guess what? They don't want to be around people like that. Now they have to endure people like that all the time, but that doesn't mean they can't. Sure, they learn very quickly how to endure those people, how to keep them at arm's length, how to please them just enough to keep them away from their inner circle, how to navigate that part of the world that's crappy. But it doesn't take them down. Certainly doesn't, because they're so resilient, because we've allowed natural consequences to occur, because we've been the safe place, because we believe that when a child is deeply connected, that creates independence. I haven't made excuses for the real world. I haven't said, yeah, I'll go in there and fight them all and take them all down for you. Absolutely not. I've said, this is what the real world is like. But you don't have to accept it in your inner circle. You don't have to accept it as your reality. And you certainly don't have to subject yourself to those kind of people as you become your own adult. You might have to put up with them right now. But you know what you like, and you know what kind of treatment is right for you because you were treated the right way in your childhood. My kids understand that. They don't want to be around people who are control freaks, who are narcissists, who are, not aligned with the idea of forgiveness and unconditional love. What my daughters don't understand either is people who lack empathy. They don't like those people. They don't want to be around those people. They don't subject themselves to those people. They've encountered them. They've had to navigate them. And they know very quickly that those are not their people, because it's taught them, this parenting, the way that we're raising them, has taught them that people who lack empathy are not your people. Those are not your trusted confidants. Those are not the people that you want to have close to you, because those kind of people don't feed our soul. Those kind of people are self-interested. Those kind of people aren't necessarily the best people to be around. My kids' spidey senses are very heightened, right? They're using their intuition to read people and to understand people. And they're not confused about who's kind and who isn't. They don't believe that power and control and even violence is associated with love in the least. That's not a confusion that they will have. That's not a confusion that they do have. So it it doesn't make sense when we say your child isn't going to understand the real world. No, they're not going to accept the maladies of the real world. They're not going to accept being treated like crap because they were treated like crap growing up. They were treated well. And so they crave to be treated well by those around them, and they will search and find those people instead of accepting someone who is deeply seated in control because their parents were controlling, or to accept violence because their parents were violent, or to accept belittlement or shame or ridicule because their parents were using those things in their parenting. They also won't accept people who threaten them, who bribe them, because they don't want that inside of their relationships because they won't feel right to them. And when they're young, they might not exactly figure it out, but they know that those people don't make them feel good, not like the way they felt at home. And this is not coddling your child. This is showing them and modeling to them how they should expect to be treated in this real world. And if they're not treated that way in this real world, then they need to step away from whatever experience that is. And people will say, well, your boss isn't going to treat you like that. Well, I call BS on that. If you have a boss that's treating you in a certain way, then you have every right and I would hope that you would walk away from that you would find employment that feeds your soul, that you would not put up with somebody abusing you or manipulating you or threatening you or whatever the case may be. Sure, you're going to have people who aren't perfect. And yes, you're going to have experiences with bosses that aren't great, but you don't want to stay inside of an employment situation that is detrimental to your mental health. You don't want to stay in a employment situation that makes you feel unsettled. And nobody should, but some people might because they feel as if, oh, well, that was how I was treated at home. That's just the way the world is. I'm just going to have to put up with it because that's my plight in life. And it's okay because everyone's like that. I don't want that to be my child's reality. I don't want that to be their thought process. I want them to get out of situations that are hard. And yeah, you might have to take a risk. You might have you might have to quit. You might have to take unemployment. You might have to do some things that don't make sense, but is that going to give you a better mental health? Will it lead you to a better place to work? Will it change your trajectory or your life? Or should you just stay in this job where this boss is a total jerk to you? I don't I don't like that argument. I think it makes zero sense. And the parts of the real world that everybody's worried about are the parts that we need to stand up and say, those suck. I don't want that to be my child's reality. And I'll do whatever it takes to give them the tools to separate themselves from that part of our society. So, yeah, consequences aren't going to necessarily be a part of my kids' lives. They won't subject themselves. Now, certainly there are consequences we can't do anything about. Yeah, if you speed, you're going to get a ticket. Okay. You don't think everybody in the world knows that? You think you can, if you're the only way to know that is to be parented by control and punishments. You mean to tell me that a child who is parented gently goes out in the real world and thinks that they can speed and not get a ticket? I call BS on that too. That's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Completely ridiculous, to be honest. You think a person living in this world for 18 years under a roof that's gentle doesn't know the real world has consequences, hasn't experienced them in their lives? Of course they have. Everybody does, every single day. But it also doesn't mean I'm going to prepare my child to put up with that kind of behavior and expect that be how they're treated. I want them to expect to be treated with kindness and love and unconditional love and empathy and understanding. I want them to believe that that's can be and should be their reality. That's what I want. I don't know what other people want. And I'm so sick of that argument. I'm really getting on my soapbox today, y'all. Um, and I've been saying y'all a lot. I'm not from the South, but I kind of really like that. I like that word. But I am getting on my soapbox because I'm so sick of it. I'm sick of hearing it. I'm sick of the illogical thought process behind it. I'm sick of that just being the blanket statement. Well, you're not preparing them for the real world. So I'm just excusing, I'm just, I'm marking you, dumb, basically. I'm marking you as ineffective and you're an ineffective parent because you don't give your kids consequences and therefore you're ruining them and you're ruining society and all these things. And I just, I think many of us have this, maybe we don't have this thought, front of mind, but maybe it's deeper in our psyche and we don't even know it, that we kind of believe that our kids won't be able to navigate the real world. And in some ways, I hope they don't navigate that part. I hope they choose to separate from that part. I hope they choose to find their own real world that makes sense for them and not subject themselves to people who are crappy, to people who are seeking control and using manipulative ways to get what they want. Because many people do that only because that's what was done to them. And they don't even realize they're doing it. Like many adults, in adult relationships, I see manipulation all the time, guilt and manipulation and shame. And it doesn't even register, I think, with many folks because it's so normal. It's just the way the world works, right? It's the real world. That's how it works. But it doesn't have to work like that for us. And it doesn't have to be that for us. And it doesn't have to be that for our children. And they don't have to believe that that's their reality. So I'd say you can parent without consequences. You can parent with unconditional love. You can parent with acceptance and boundaries and empathy and all the things that make sense and still have kids who will very much be successful in the quote unquote real world. They know. They know exactly what that real world is made up of, and they know the places where they will walk away, and they know the places where they will lean in. And let's hope, because they were treated so well at home, that they lean in exactly where they need to. Now, they'll probably make mistakes here and there. That's okay. Their core will know better. They'll know what feels right. I was raised by an alcoholic and a couple of alcoholics, and they say you pick an alcoholic for your relationships, and I picked many. It was subconscious. I didn't want to pick alcoholics. I didn't even like alcohol. I didn't want to be around it, but I picked them because they felt like home to me, because they felt like love to me, because they felt like something I knew. And so we don't want our children to pick something that they know, meaning manipulation or punishment or consequence or conditional love. We don't want them to pick those things subconsciously just because they feel like home. We'd like them to pick just the opposite because those feel like home. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Soapbox now. I appreciate you listening. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this pinged something in your heart and soul. And I look forward to chatting with you next time.